Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bianca Durrani, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on using AI for donor engagement. I am the CEO of Aperio Philanthropy, which is a co-host of this webinar with NYU. We are a consulting firm with a vision for a world in which everyone can thrive and exists to unleash the power of communities to drive change. Day to day, that means we work alongside community leaders and fundraisers to develop simpler, faster, and smarter ways to generate revenue for their missions. Our client services provide strategic support, hands on support, and embedded fundraisers to organizations nationwide. As a firm created to drive change, we're thrilled to be hosting this event series with New York University. For the past several years, we've been facilitating conversations among thought leaders, practitioners, and leaders in fundraising about the role of philanthropy in driving change and solving complex societal challenges. Today's much anticipated topic is how to use AI for donor engagement and really finding those opportunities for our missions. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our co-host, Michelle D'Amico.
Thanks, Bianca. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle D'Amico, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Public Programs at the NYU SPS Center for Global Affairs, or CGA, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's conversation. Before I turn this over to our impressive speakers, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Center for Global Affairs. Since its founding, our goal at the CGA has been to prepare global citizens to make a positive impact in the world. We do this through a variety of activities, including our 2 graduate programs, one in global affairs and another MS in global security, conflict, and cybercrime. We also offer a wide variety of skills and knowledge-based continuing education courses and offer public events such as this that expand upon the topics we cover in our classrooms. I'm very proud to be home to the George H. Hayman Jr. Program for Fundraising and Philanthropy. Through our open enrollment courses, on-site intensives, and certificate in fundraising, we offer professionally oriented educational options for those looking to enter or grow within the fundraising field. Courses are taught by practitioner faculty who bring their vast expertise, experience, and networks to the classroom. We'll send out more information about our programs following today's conversation, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator, Erin Capone. With over 20 years of experience in fundraising, Dr. Erin Capone has a reputation for delivering massive revenue growth while applying social justice lens to her work with donors. Erin is a published scholar in donor decision-making and currently leads initiatives to train gift officers to leverage AI for precision fundraising. As a social worker, researcher, and veteran fundraiser, Erin brings a humanistic and data-centered perspective to our conversation on the future of AI and donor engagement. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Capone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you, Bianca. It's super exciting to be with you all today. And I think part of that excitement stems from if you had told me 20 years ago, starting a fundraising career, that would be sitting here today to talk about artificial intelligence and donor engagement, I would have lost that bet. But with that in mind, both Bianca and Michelle talked about change. And I think that's really at the heart of what's bringing us all together. I think you'll see that theme come across. And so super glad to be with you all today as we explore the topic that's front of mind for so many of us, using AI for donor engagement. And so as we're all seeing, AI is rapidly transforming how we as nonprofits engage supporters, but many of us are still unsure about how to do 2 things, which is 1, harnessing the potential of AI and what that looks like, but also how do we think about and mitigate the risks that AI might propose. And so certainly the early adopters among us have shown how AI can support everything, all the above the shoulders work of strategy development, analytics, and planning, all the way to the below the shoulders work, right, of the outreach, proposal development, and the stewardship that we do with those who support the work. And so these benefits, as we know, can free up some really valuable fundraiser time for that core work, right? That relationship building and that engagement. But at a time where we're also thinking a lot about donor trust and that ebb and flow, getting it right and getting the adoption of AI and donor engagement, getting that right is really key. So, a bit of a roadmap for our time together today. In this hour, we're going to explore four main buckets. So, first is looking at the potential for integrating AI into our donor engagement work. Then we're going to move into, and I love this part because I always think this is the most helpful part of any training, are then looking at the actual practical applications for fundraisers and moving beyond the buzzwords and looking at what are some really concrete things that are actionable and you can put into practice. We'll look at and talk about how to use AI ethically and responsibly. No surprise from a social worker that we want to take a look at the ethics and think of it through that lens. And we'll also look at pitfalls. So what are those common mistakes that we want to avoid? And so I have the immense pleasure and honor of introducing to you all what are an incredible group of panelists. And as I introduce them, I think you'll see this thread that unites them, where they're sitting within their roles and taking these incredible high-level thinking about systems and infrastructure, and then figuring out how do we funnel that out into actual change in our communities and in the lives of individuals and families. And so to start, we're welcoming Meena Das, who currently serves as CEO of Namaste Data and founder of the AI Equity Project. There, she's helping nonprofits do really important things, which is to protect trust while they modernize. And Meena's accomplishing this and doing this by asking better questions. Love a question as a social worker. So Meena's helping folks ask better questions, collecting data responsibly, and then using AI in ways that reduce burnout, not deepen it. And then there, she's also designing data collection tools, AI assessments, and AI equity workshops for teams. And so, Meena, I'm sure the folks with us are giving you a thunderous round of applause that you can't hear in this format, but welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Next, I'm excited to introduce to you Kelly Hecht. Kelly currently serves as Strategic Executive Advisor of Global Research and Nonprofit at Amazon Web Services. There, she's helping organizations deliver results by honoring what makes them unique and then also guiding their technology-enabled modernization across a few different lanes, which are operations, fundraising, marketing, and innovation, all with an eye toward delivering on their missions. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great group you've brought together today.
And the same thunderous round of applause for you as well. Next up, we're welcoming Aziza Musa, who's currently serving as Chief External Affairs Officer at Tilting Futures. And Tilting Futures is all about giving young people in the US and also around the world access to really critical things, including social capital, work experiences, and real world skills to become the kind of leaders that our world really desperately needs now more than ever. There at Tilting Futures, Aziza's leading development, marketing and communications, and brand for the organization. And because there's not enough hours in the day, she's also co-founder of Two Dots, which is a community for women navigating the intersection of purpose, leadership, and impact. Welcome, Aziza.
Thank you, Erin. Hi, everyone.
Again, more thunderous applause. I'm really hoping that folks listening are like actively applauding a little social behavior experiment. And Dominic Papa is our next panelist, and he's currently serving as Senior Director at Phoenix Community Alliance. Dom is a nationally recognized civic innovator, attorney, and coalition builder. Again, social worker, love a coalition. And in these kind of realms and roles, Dom is committed to creating thriving, inclusive communities through really bold public-private collaboration, which is certainly no easy feat. And with over a decade of experience at this intersection of government, technology, and economic development, Dom has led some of Arizona's most impactful smart city and digital equity efforts. Welcome, Dom.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So, everyone, we're going to jump in and we'll do a little bit of an open call to all of our panelists. So, as a social worker, I love a lens. I'm always curious what lens folks are looking through. And so we'll go in this order, but Mina, Kelly, Aziza, and Dom, could you, to get us started, briefly share with all of us what lens are you bringing into this conversation today?
So my lens would be three, Erin, I think. One would be as a data equity consultant who is working with nonprofits and foundations around making sure that the data collection is accessible and inclusive. My second lens is as a researcher around the AI equity project to ensure that this sector can truly adopt AI equitably. Again, equity and inclusion is sort of my centerpiece. And then the third lens is just as a user of these algorithms and systems, as someone with bringing in my identity. I grew up in beautiful India and moved to States and Canada about 7, 8 years ago. So not only as a researcher and data scientist, but also as a user of these systems. I'm combining these three lenses into this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for allowing us to share that lens so people know where we're coming from. I identify as a nonprofit executive and leader, and always will. And the additional element that I add now is that I have learned technology in a way that I, quite frankly, never expected to, and find myself now with a body of information and understanding that I never would have had if I had stayed my whole career inside the 501(c)(3) space. And so the lens that I'm going to bring is really on extracting which aspects of the knowledge around technology that I now have are relevant to someone who sits in a non-technical role inside the nonprofit. Because there are some really important aspects there that I think are valuable to understand without having to become, a certified IT professional.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for this question. So I'll start by saying that I think my lens has a lot to do with my role. As you shared, Erin, I'm the Chief External Affairs Officer for Tilting Futures, and we're a global education nonprofit with pretty limited resources. So anyone in the crowd who is part of a small or mid-sized nonprofit, our operating budget in any given year is roughly $5 million, which in practice means and not to scare any future nonprofit leaders in the crowd who want to go into this field, but in practice, it means I'm the major gifts fundraiser, I'm the communications director, I'm the team manager, and on any given afternoon, I'm also working on higher ed partnership strategy and I'm doing business development. So I say all that to say lean doesn't even begin to cover it. And where I land, I think in my lens is I'm really cautiously pragmatically optimistic about AI and its role in fundraising and donor engagement. And on any given day, I think I genuinely swing between oh my God, I'm so excited about what this can do and how it can help us to deeply skeptical. And I actually think that's the right posture. I mean, it's my posture, so I'm biased, but I think part of it is that this isn't my first tech rodeo, right? I remember when Salesforce was the thing that was going to change everything. And the CRM before that, if people remember Razor's Edge, that was supposed to change everything. And they did, but I think only for the organizations that really implemented them with discipline. They iterated, they measured, and they were staying honest about what wasn't working and what was. And I think AI is really similar. And I think the other lens I bring is just I saw a tweet the other day from this woman in tech, and she was very skilled in the AI space. And she had given her AI agent access with to her inbox with really specific instructions and decided that the most efficient thing, the AI agent decided the most efficient thing it could do with her inbox was delete it. And she, I think, tried to do the kill switch on her phone. It didn't work. And then she tried to do it on her iPad and it didn't work. And then she had to run into the office and with seconds to spare, was able to activate the kill switch. But I bring that to the fold to say, we don't have a tech team at Tilting Futures. We don't have a kill switch person. And so the question I keep asking and the lens I keep bringing is how do we experiment in ways that gives us more time with donors without
blowing up our inboxes in the process, no matter how much we might want to.
Thank you.
Awesome. All great answers. And I do enjoy this question because it actually makes you take a step back and actually think about kind of the work you're doing and that lens that you bring. And so I really appreciated this question. And so I kind of think when I was thinking about it, kind of my lens is that of a practitioner, especially prior to my role now when I was leading cloud innovation centers at AWS. We were really known for kind of rolling up our sleeves, being the ones in the trenches, actually building the infrastructure and not sort of theorizing about it. I think you mentioned, attorney by training, civic technologist by career, but for the past couple of years, the work that I'm kind of really excited about is being deeply embedded in the operational side of a major healthcare foundation, helping them to really rethink how AI can transform the development function from the inside out. It's been a really fun journey with them. And what I've come to believe is that the most is interesting question isn't really can AI do this? Because honestly, it almost always can. The more interesting question is, what does your organization need to be true before AI can actually deliver the value that we all know that it can? And so some of the things that to me that means is, clean data, clear processes, and a team that understands what the machine is actually doing and why, right? And so I come to the conversation from that kind of implementation first perspective. And so really excited to have this conversation today.
Thanks, everyone. And it's funny as hearing your lenses, they all seem complementary to each other, right? What are we bringing into AI in terms of an equity lens? What are we extracting and bringing out into nonprofits? What is happening practically on the ground, and how do we think about the use? And then as well as how do we think up there in kind of theory and abstract concept and that relationship between? So I just have in my mind like a little compass direction that you all are bringing. And so to that, the researcher in me loves an operational definition. And so Kelly, I wanted to start with you because AI is such a broad term. It's a big umbrella. It encompasses so many things. And so could you give us all kind of an overview of the fundamentals that you think we should all understand?
So I think of AI as a category more than a proper noun. And I like to use the analogy of dessert because I like food. So if you were to say to someone, can you go get me dessert? Or I want dessert, that could be interpreted a lot of different ways, right? They could get you ice cream. They could get you a cake. They could get you a cookie. And without the information of specifically what you needed or wanted, just asking for dessert might not deliver what you need. If you're going on a long car ride and they bring you ice cream, that's unhelpful. If you have an allergy to pistachios and they bring you a cannoli, that could be a problem, right? So the detail really matters. So in that case, there are 3 different types of AI capabilities as it stands today, subject to change in the future. The first is predictive. That is something where we're looking backwards and we're using that information to help us predict what might be possible in the future. Then there's something called generative, which is really what came onto the scene a couple of years ago and sparked a lot of attention, which is when it's taking information and sorting and analyzing it really quickly and using that to generate something new. And most recently is the introduction of agentic AI, which allows multiple pathways and multiple streams to be happening at once. So to keep with the food analogy, you can think of predictive as sort of like your open table app. It looks at where you've eaten before and predicts what food you might want in the future. You can think of generative as you enter some requirements that you want. You want something in a certain location with a certain cuisine that has maybe large groups that you can make a reservation at, and it will generate a list based on that criteria by sorting through large volumes of information quickly. And then agentic is, imagine that you had an agent that looked at your open table history, took all the information of what you're looking to achieve, and then matched that up against your calendar. and then presented you with a recommendation, knowing that your meeting ended at 5 and it was a 30-minute walk to where you needed to be, and therefore a reservation at this restaurant would make the most sense. So hopefully that sort of grounds people in a definition that that why it matters to understand the differences and to be more specific in what we're talking about.
So I love that for many reasons, because it's clear, and I too love food and was convinced as a child I had a separate stomach for desserts.
Of course.
I love the dessert analogy. And picking up again on that imagery of being in the car with the ice cream. Mina, I want to connect now with you. If we're in the car, where are we going? So like, as you think about the work you do with funders and fundraising teams, part of, I imagine, the challenge of that is knowing, or them knowing, like where to start, where to put their focus. And so what kinds of things are you recommending?
Sure, but and I do have to tell you the extra stomach thing is true. I still believe it. So it's true. If you can have extra desserts.
Please write to my mother. Let her know.
So for your question, I'm going to say that when I work with nonprofits, I get this question at the organizations at different starting points. Some have written some form of policy, some haven't. Some are still figuring out, playing with some tools in some of the departments, not even the entire organization. They're a bit all over the place. So to your question, which is a good question, where do we start? I say we start with a conversation. We are getting very comfortable talking to a black window, ChatGPT, Claude, and saying the most personal things, managing our relationship, office relationship, the things that our manager or boss should have supported. I feel comfortable now. Okay, I'm going to go into the ChatGPT. I work with those people. I work with people where they share when they got rejections in the office, and they're using these tools for emotional regulation, to writing emails, to writing social media posts. We are becoming very comfortable talking to one screen and sharing our life. And that human interaction is getting replaced somehow, even though we don't want to intentionally. So my starting place for most organizations I work with is have a conversation with your team, with your peers. It doesn't have to be a separate meeting if you can't afford it, but it can be at least 20 minutes in a group conversation or a town hall or a team meeting to discuss, how are we using this technology? Why are we using this technology? How can we improve upon it? Or what are the friction points? And that's a habit problem. That's not an intentional, malicious problem. I don't want to talk to my staff members. It's more of a habit thing. And I do want, with your permission, want to read something. So I love my library. If anyone who knows me through LinkedIn, they know how much I love my library. Every Thursday, it sends out a newsletter, and today's newsletter had something: your habits will hold you back more than your enemies ever will, which is a good news, because you can change your habits. You can't change your enemies. So we can change this, having and starting with a conversation. That's where I'll start.
Thank you, Mina. And I thank you, especially because you've teed us up very well for the next question for Dom. And so Dom, picking up on that thread of less about the technology and more about the people and the process of being the real challenge. From your perspective, what does effective change management look like as your organization is integrating AI into the fundraising work?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, great segue as well. That framing is exactly right. And honestly, I'd even go further. If you skip the people and the process work, the technology actually makes things really worse. It automates confusion, right? And so when we started the work with the Phoenix Children's Hospital Foundation, the team was spending an enormous amount of time on manual prospect research, right? They were pulling records, cross-referencing, well screening data, building briefings by hand, weeks of work for kind of a single portfolio review. So before we even started to touch any automation, we sat down with the team and asked, what are those decisions that you are actually trying to make? And kind of what information would make those decisions faster and better, right? So to your point, we started with a conversation, and that conversation actually helped us change everything. We stopped building tools and started to build a decision support system The outputs weren't reports. They were kind of these curated signals delivered to the right person at the right moment and kind of formatted in a way that they think about their work and not how the machine thinks about their work. And so it was really fascinating, some of those conversations. And maybe another key piece in my mind that I would love to emphasize to this group is that early wins earn trust. We didn't launch with the full vision. We launched with kind of one automated workflow that saved people time, right? And so they started to really see the benefit in the technology, in the process. And so we really started to earn trust. And so once they saw it work reliably, the appetite for it grew more and more and more. And so change management in AI adoption isn't kind of a one-time training. It's a series, kind of a small credibility wins and steps along the way. And of course, I will say one more thing, sorry, that I think is incredibly important is kind of that executive level leadership and vision. At the foundation, they have a really incredible leader with a really bold and really powerful vision that helps really drive that thinking and that buy-in across the organization. I don't think without his vision, the organization would be able to do some of the things they're doing. And Kelly, you probably appreciate that. It's working backwards from that vision and building that change management and that AI to achieve that vision ultimately.
Thanks so much. And to that end, I want to pivot a bit and draw Dom you in again, as well as Aziza. And maybe it's the NYU background, but I think a lot about Miss Rachel and story time. And so I'm hoping we could have a bit of story time for a moment, where I'd like you both to walk us through some of the ways you've leveraged AI for donor engagement. So Dom, you've just outlined this process. And so to that end, could you both tell us a bit about how did you select those areas? What was the approach? And then having gone through all of that, what would you now recommend to the folks who are joining us this afternoon?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I feel like I have so much to learn from you, Dom. But honestly, when I think about kind of what are some of the ways that we've leveraged AI for donor engagements, like part of me thinks the better question is like, what haven't we used it for? Because it's been interesting that the development team has been where adoption has been both like the fastest and the deepest. And I also want to say that didn't happen on its own. You were talking, Dom, earlier about kind of the importance of like leadership and vision at the top. It's also important as when it comes to AI, I think, to say the importance of modeling at the top, because for a while, I think AI use was happening like in the shadows on the development team. And I was like, so I realized like I needed to be more public about the way I was using AI, and that helped tremendously. So I would like, in Slack say, hey guys, I just used ChatGPT on this. Can you guys please use this prompt? Because it really worked for like prepping for the Skoll Global Forum, for example, for a major global conference. And I think once I started doing that openly, I just noticed that adoption started to accelerate. But to Dom's point, it was very much function by function, task by task. And that is very different than the way, let's say, we rolled out Salesforce in 2010 when I was at Teach for America. Very different, which was like a grand rollout. That has its place. I actually appreciate the kind of individual experimentation approach that we've been taking. And I actually think it's had more interesting results. But in terms of what we do now, I just want to, there's so many, but I'll name like the top three because they're the most common. First, this sounds so small. And I know AI meeting notes has been around for a minute, but we have tested so many and they're not that great until we landed on granola. And I'm not sponsored by granola, I promise, but notes that, I remember me and the CEO would have like, it would be like day 10 of the month, and we'd have a backlog of meeting notes and that we like need to manually upload and type into Salesforce and all this and that. And so, that now happens same day with one click. And then we further automated kind of Slack to Salesforce so that it's like, and then another click and it's uploaded to Salesforce. So I think our follow-ups go out within 24 hours now. They used to take, anywhere from 2 to 3 business days. That's better stewardship, which is amazing. I think the other thing is dev comms, co-working with, we used to be with ChatGPT. We've made a team decision to all transfer over to Claude. And so what we do is we kind of leverage templates for newsletters, annual reports, appeals, and we feed it the raw information plus the template, ask it to shape the architecture. So I won't tell you that it's completely seamless and one click. It's not that at all. It is very much like us doing the writing. But when I compare last year's annual report process to this year's, it cut it down by 50%. And that's just that means more time that I can be spending with donors and prospects and board members. So I think it organized our thinking faster. And then the third I'll name is we're probably a little bit of a unique development shop in the sense that our junior staff tend to do a lot of the ghostwriting for me and the CEO in terms of like the daily communications with donors. And it's worked surprisingly really, really well. Once you can train it to kind of like learn my voice, our CEO's voice, that's been more effective, certainly. There's a lot more less back and forth in terms of feedback, like that's not how you say this, that's not my voice, etc. But also calendar your appeals, mid-level stewardship. I do just want to say though that for major and principal level giving, I do that myself. Those relationships, the context is it's too personal, it's too specific, and the quality of your input is ultimately the quality of your output when it comes to AI, and that's good. But for the level of donors that we're working with, that's right now at least where I draw the line. And I'm happy to share more, but Dom, would love to hear your thoughts.
No, that's great. Yeah. Congratulations on some of that work. That's wonderful. So I'll give maybe one concrete version of what we're building / built because yeah, I think it could paint a good picture in everyone's mind of how we're kind of leveraging it right now. So we built what we call a prospect intelligence platform. It's an end-to-end automated system that runs every week without anyone pushing a button. So what it does, it pulls gift transactions data directly from the CRM. It then cross-references it against wealth screening data from donor search, Zoom info, external databases. It then runs each prospect through a capacity scoring model, and then it generates an AI drafted briefing that the gift officers can use to prepare for those conversations. So the whole pipeline from raw data to a formatted briefing in a gift officer's inbox runs in a matter of minutes. That used to take days for the research team to put together. We also, as a part of that, built intelligent trigger workflows, 13 of them that fire automatically when a specific donor behavior occurs. So think about like a new major gift, a first gift, a trust gift, a matching gift. Each of those trigger routes to the right gift officer based on the portfolio alignment and prospect tier with enriched context already attached to it. So no one has to notice the signal. The system surfaces it for them. It's really kind of powerful stuff. And we're kind of seeing it being implemented right now. And so I think the question was, how did we select these areas? Well, we started through the conversations that I kind of mentioned earlier with the highest friction, highest stakes moment in the fundraising cycle, the point at which a prospect moves from kind of being cold to warm. The transition was invisible in their existing process, but AI kind of made it visible for them. So my recommendation would be to other teams, map your highest value moments of friction first, not where kind of AI is the flashy, kind of whistle, but kind of where your team is currently losing time or maybe losing signals. I would start there.
Thank you both so much. And I love that piece of like the behavioral signals, right? And then using how we leverage AI to help kind of point our gaze, strategically. And so I think to that point, Kelly, you've got a background in integrated fundraising. And so I'm curious for your perspective on how AI is affecting broad-based individual giving. And to that end, what recommendations do you have for all of us as you think about that donor funnel and behaviorally what's happening. But how are you thinking through acquiring new donors, deepening their engagement, and then building that kind of loyalty and kind of cycle giving?
Yeah. So before I answer that, I want to sort of thread a couple needles of things people have said so far to make sure that everyone's connecting some of these dots. So there was some great reference earlier, I think, from Aziza about Salesforce being the shiny object, and before that, the CRMs being, and Dom talked a little bit about the people part of this, right? And I think what's really important to remember as you're starting to adopt various forms of AI is that it can be a catalyst for things you always knew you needed to do, but haven't done because someone believed that the technology was going to solve all the problems, right? So, by way of example, when you do a CRM conversion, you spend a lot of time talking about the business rules around how the data is used and housed and stored. Well, those conversations around your business rules probably should have happened regardless of whether you were doing a CRM conversion. So I think it's an opportunity to recognize that not only is the technology exciting and great and powerful, but it is a catalyst for the hard work that needs to be done. Along those lines, you've heard both of our great leaders from inside a nonprofit speak about how they're using it today, and appropriately, both have started with using it for the ways they're doing business today. Right. So how do we take our work streams and our process flows and our operations and make them more efficient? And there's also an opportunity to reimagine the way we do it, because sometimes the way you've been doing it may not necessarily be something that you want to just do faster and more of, because we have a new opportunity. So along those lines, Erin, it's a great opportunity to ask different questions than maybe you're used to asking, and give yourself permission to sit in that discomfort for a minute of well, what if we didn't do it the way we've always done it, and see what comes of that. So with those two sort of as through lines from what these great leaders have shared in their direct experience, I think as we think about integrated fundraising moving forward, I think of it in two categories. There's the internal things you can do, and then the external things that you can do. And I really encourage people to resist the natural temptation to start with the external. Most people started with what communications they could write and what things they could create graphically, right? But I think where we stand to have the most powerful impact is when we look internally at our operations, our systems, our workflows, our processes, the way that our technology is integrated. We have long acknowledged that as a sector, we are under-resourced with humans and capital. This is the opportunity to change that, right? Because many of these technologies can, in fact, help fill some of those gaps. So I would really encourage people to start internally, and in doing so, and again, this will feel perhaps uncomfortable to some, give yourself permission not to know, not to be the one that anticipates what the donor does or doesn't want, but instead to just create options and opportunities. And we live more and more in a world where the consumer gets to drive their own experience, and I think in philanthropy that's not necessarily a bridge we've crossed yet. We're still working really hard, to Dom's point, to analyze their capacity and analyze all the things we know about them and deliver that perfect message. And it's well intended, but it's okay to not know, and simply invite them into the conversation to sort of guide their own journey a little bit more.
Thanks so much. And I think to that, it's a good segue to that concept of internal versus external focus. Because to that end, I want Mina to draw you in because we've been talking about how we all would use AI in donor engagement, but there's another side to this coin, another piece to the puzzle, which is how are donors and funders thinking about AI in the moment. And I'll share the example that we've had donors use algorithms to source out grantees. So tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about that.
I have a couple of thoughts in here, and I, like Kelly, I'm going to piece it and pull something from everyone. And this might not be exactly the question you asked me, so tell me, like, Mina, I asked you one more question, but I get a
Answer
question.
what you want.
I often get a question because I talk a lot about you have to start the conversation. AI is a different kind of technology than one before. It did start out as a shiny object. The unique thing about AI are two things. One, it's a self-learning technology. Email was not, CRMs were not. That makes it a bit different. And the second thing that makes it a bit different is that it is allowing individuals to look into different departments and do that work. So, if I'm a one-person team, I'm a comms person, I can also start doing sales work using AI. I can also shift between industries. So if I am just in philanthropy, I can now start teaching same thing or doing something and finding a side hustle in a different industry. So it's opening my direction every possible way, this way, that way, this way, every possible way. That's different, again, with AI. Now, the question I get is, how do I choose curiosity? Like Kelly said, which I talk as well, you have to look internal. You have to start with your goal, your purpose, your strengths. And I get a question, how do I choose curiosity if I do not understand the technology fully yet? If I do not know what are its capabilities, if I do not experiment with writing one social post or making one video using Sora, which by the way doesn't exist anymore, how do I be more curious? That's a question I often get. And that's where I think I ask people, funders or fundraisers, to go back to your drawing boards, to go back to your conversations around the table. You can start with, you are the ones, regardless of all the 62 people here in the room, whether they are coming from fundraising side of things or funder side of things or students going to be on either side of the camps. You're coming from places, we are coming from groups that can where curiosity is not exactly limited to one specific tool. I also want to shift a bit. I think I'm losing my train of thought, and I kind of want to touch on the question specific. How am I thinking about the funder versus fundraisers perspective? When it comes to this technology, curiosity or not, both the groups are asking the same questions. Whether this technology would be used for good in this sector, whether it is being used ethically, what about the environmental concerns, what about the data privacy concerns, and when it comes to fundraisers, if they are specifically talking about fundraisers, if we want to think about what they can do to respond to funders, they can start thinking about the ethics and privacy and transparency pieces of the AI policies, specifically to the AI policy part. And I want to give an example of an organization based out of Seattle. They started with an AI policy 2 years ago, which was an org-wide policy. And the fundraising team, they started using donor engagement, Aziza mentioned, in like shadow basis. So they were using on a shadow basis. And they still had an AI policy. They weren't following it fully, which what they did in the last 12 months is they took that and created a sub-policy specific to the fundraising department to understand, pulling donor bill of rights, pulling a bunch of different information on how to interact with donors, and to come up with a bunch of communication on what is their position and posture around ethics and transparency and accountability. And then they're taking it back to the donors and funders equally to share on their website, in their communication. This is how we are thinking about transparency or accountability with AI. So going back to the question I got myself into is, how can you be curious when you haven't tried a tool before? it is sort of it's a bit of a mix. You start trying something, but you have to go back to your conversation of drawing boards and then bringing it back to the fundraising, pull it into a conversation of transparently sharing back with the community on what you've been working with. There is no right and wrong answer here, but mostly the point is, can it be collective? Can it be community centered? Can it be something transparent? And can it make me accountable for things when they go wrong? If we can position around those, I think we are heading in a good direction. That's a very long way to, I don't know the question you asked or not, but I love this topic, so I can pull a bunch of different threads.
Thank you, Meena. That's really great. And I think to your point, that piece around curiosity and accountability, it reminds me so much of the focus of a lot of my work is that idea of power and trust between donor and organization, or how each side is kind of coming to the relationship. And I think to that point, Aziza, I would love to pick your brain because our sector, our work, we do talk a lot about that trust between the nonprofits and donors. And I'm curious for your thoughts on in what ways can AI help? And in what ways do we need to think about the risks and how might we mitigate those risks?
Such a great question. I think for me, the way I think about it is AI's relationship to donor trust in many ways depends entirely where and how you deploy it. So, for example, for us, we're a major gift shop, 6 and 7 figure relationships at that level. And I know my examples earlier when I said how we're leveraging it, we're very focused on comms. So maybe this will sound like a contradiction, but I promise it's not. But AI comms doesn't just miss, it carries incredibly high stakes if it misses the mark. And I say that to kind of frame the donor trust piece and why I tend to draw a hard line when it comes to communication with those donors at those giving levels. I think the flip side for me is what actually excites me more, which is like AI, for at least me and my team, has given us time back for the things that ultimately make our sector work, which is, the most radical thing you can do right now is to build human connection and to prioritize that in the age of AI. And so, the team is very sick of hearing me say this, but like my mantra for the last 6 months has been, guys, we need to fundraise like it's 2010. And what I mean by that is we're taking planes, trains, cars, automobile, like we are in person all the time. We have really cut down our Zoom and phone calls. Well, phone calls, I think we've actually gone up, but we've cut down our Zoom. And I think we're all, and actually, I think Bianca, you said this so beautifully when we were talking about this event of like, all of us have this aspirational percentage in our mind as fundraisers of like, how do I make it so that I'm out in the field with donors and prospects 80% of the time? And it's funny when you said that stat, that's like my secret stat that I'm always trying to hit and I'm always missing. And I think for the first time ever this year, like I'm closer than I've ever been. And I think a huge part of that is because of the ways we've been leveraging AI. And then I'll also say in terms of trust, there's this other piece I just want to fold in here, which is like on the grant writing side for folks in the audience who are either in that world and/or thinking of going into it. It'll be interesting to hear what questions folks have and how they navigate it. But for us, like I was just reading a stat the other day that there's a pretty large percentage of foundations right now that won't accept an AI generated proposal, that they're like flagging it. And yet I know a lot of nonprofit shops that are using AI to generate their proposals and finding it a convenient way to kind of do that at scale. So you've got this weird loop where we're writing with AI and some foundations are either tossing it out because it's AI, others are responding with AI. And so it's like AI talking to AI. And somewhere in the middle, actual human mission and relationships, I think just are at risk of disappearing. And I think at the core of that is a trust problem. And then I think lastly, there's the people piece. So we all have seen the stats and read the articles that the entry-level roles are most at risk right now. And I don't know about you all on the screen, my fellow panelists, but those entry-level roles are how I got started 20 years ago. My first role was a dev coordinator / executive assistant to a CEO of a nonprofit. And I did everything. I did the gift processing, I did the prospect research, and I did the writing support. If those are disappearing, I really worry about the future of the kind of talent pipeline into development. And if we eliminate those to save money, we're not just making a budget decision, we're making a decision about who gets to have a career in the sector. And that's an equity problem. And I think that's one that keeps me up at night. And I'll just finish by saying this, which is I was interviewing a co-founder of LinkedIn for an event last month, and he said something really interesting, which is maybe in my mind a little bit of an antidote to the trust problem, which is unlike the UBSs of the world. I just read a headline that 20,000 they did layoffs and 20,000 people were laid off. I don't know a nonprofit that has that much of a workforce, unless you're talking about like the universities and the hospitals. We're a 28-person team. Every single person on that team has a very important role to play that we have zero interest in replacing with AI. But to his point, I think he's right. I mean, he knows better than I do. What do I know? But one of the things he said I thought was so fascinating is it's not about replacing the humans. It's about hiring humans who know how to assess the outputs of AI effectively, such that it adds value to the business. And so that's something that we've been thinking a lot about too.
And Aziza, I feel there's so many really big threads that you've laid out. And so I think the social worker in me wants to kind of reflect a few back and then see from the group which one's standing out most. And so Aziza, a few pieces that stood out to me about what you said, which is one, in some ways, that question of the use of AI and the human connection, there's this piece and this opportunity that the use of AI will allow more time for human connection. And we're having a very similar conversation in social work, which is the sense of like, will AI replace mental health clinicians? And it's really about allowing them to focus their time in the spaces and places where it's most needed. And so I hear that piece. And I also hear you talking about, in some ways, that those trust questions or dynamics of even that 80-20, that percentage reminds me of the 80-20 requirements on nonprofits and how we ask nonprofits to stretch themselves or be in places or to exist in ways that we don't ask other types of organizations to do. And so in some ways, I think what I hear you saying is some of this bit around trust in AI is mirroring, these larger conversations we need to have. And so I guess I'm curious for all of you on the panel, as you're hearing some of these threads, like what stands out to you the most, or what's a piece that you think is humming in the background that we're not naming or we haven't yet talked about that are, that all of those with us today might want to be thinking about?
Do you want us to go in a specific order, Erin, or?
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
The social worker will sit in silence comfortably, which is not helpful for panel conversations. Kelly, it'd be great if you could jump in.
Sure. I can sit comfortably in silence too. I just don't know that the folks on the call want that. You know, to your point, wow, there were so many good threads that just got opened right there. I feel like we could do a whole nother hour just on those. I think there's a couple things. One is for everyone to just take a deep breath. Like there's just this, I think because it's technology that creates more technology, there's a sense of inertia and pace that I notice in people. They talk faster when they talk about AI. There's almost like a panic. It's okay. Take a breath. It's not going anywhere. It's going to change a lot. And so I think in there is to take that moment of breath to ground yourself in a couple of things. One is you're already doing a lot really well. The second is you already know a lot more than you give yourself credit for. And just go hire someone from the outside world into the nonprofit sector, and you'll very quickly be reminded how much you know you don't realize or give yourself credit for. Um, and then I think from there, with those things as grounding, it's really to just sort of frame what questions do you need to be asking? We are so skilled in our sector out of force at solving problems. And so we jump really fast from the problem to the solution. And I think the power that isn't named enough is the benefit of sitting in the unknown, because that's actually where the technology or your technology partners can start to bring to bear some really beautiful and interesting ways to accent your work and your workforce. So breathe, be confident in what you know and are already doing. And then lastly, try not to jump ahead to solutioning, but to sit and bring really authentic questions to the people and the partners and the space around you.
Thank you, Kelly. And certainly to have folks jump in, I do want to share that we have a question from the audience, and so also want to be mindful and thoughtful of the input. And so the question that is in front of us is asking the group to share more about the approach when setting up AI agents. Let's try to say that 10 times fast. AI agents, especially for things like prospect research, notes processing. What are some of the high-level considerations you all are keeping in mind?
Yeah, happy to jump in here. Some of the things we think about is scalability, right? So we're building in scale as a design feature from the very beginning. And so we're being very strategic about that. A couple of other things, obviously, security is a major factor in a lot of the design work as we're thinking about these workflows, these systems, and these processes. And last, because I think we touched on this just a little bit in our panel prep conversation, is this idea of model resiliency, right? Because these models are evolving at an alarming rate, and ensuring that your organization has the ability or capability to flex between models or between systems, just depending on the certain situations or the circumstances. I think these are some of the questions or these design principles that we think through and when we're starting to look at design and set up these systems. So those are just three things on the top of my head.
Thank you so much, Dom. And so we are getting close to time, so I want to do the last fast take, right? So for each of our panelists, Mina, we'll begin with you, then Aziza, Dom, and Kelly. Can you share with all of us what is kind of one tangible piece that everyone, one small change that everyone could consider making in the next 6 months related to their use of AI? What would that be?
I love that question. Even when I got it, I think we all are getting a chance to think about what does my joyful version look like. This is the first time in the history we are getting a technology that can do a lot of things, and the abundance mindset version, the non-harmful version of using and adopting AI is just to ask, what is the happy version of Mina look like, and try to bring in technology then and integrate it from that point in the next 6 months.
Well, I don't feel like I'm enough of an expert to recommend, but I will tell you one thing that this call is making me personally want to do in the next 6 months. And maybe that'll be helpful, which is, it actually is inspired by something you said, Kelly, which is, I think I'm going to pick one thing, like in the next 6 months, where my team, like, has the expertise, not the time, something internal, because we've been using it almost exclusively externally. And so hearing your framing, Kelly, really has me like pivoting when I go back to my team today. But I think it's going to be starting with an internal operations problem. And Lord knows we have plenty to choose from. So that'll be mine. And if anybody would like to join me and be an accountability buddy, I welcome that too.
I forgot the order. Am I next?
Yes.
It's actually it's actually perfect because when I was taking notes for this question, it's exactly in line with that. It's, identify one decision your team makes repeatedly, prospect qualification, portfolio prioritization, briefing prep, whatever it is, and build a simple automated data pipeline to support just that one decision, not a platform, not a transformation initiative, just one pipeline. Prove to yourself and your team that clean data moving automatically to the right person at the right moment changes how that decision gets made. Once you've felt that, you won't need anyone to convince you of AI's potential in the fundraising space. So you've lived it, right? And so I think that's kind of my recommendation.
I love that Dom forgets how much technology he knows because he just said create a simple automated data pipeline, which
Sorry.
I was like, I'm not sure there is such a thing, Dom, but I'm with you. I would say the one thing I would encourage everyone to do is make a list of all the technology partners you work with. And the next time you're on the phone with each one of them, ask them how they are using AI in the tools you are already using. I am hypersensitive to our industry being well intended, but taken advantage of for things we don't need or already have. It's really important to understand how and where the tools you are already using are embedding all three forms of AI so that you can maximize it and so that you don't duplicate it by purchasing something else.
I love that. And so I would say, on behalf of all of the folks who've watched in, just huge rounds of applause and huge thank you to all of you for sharing both your time and incredible insights with all of us today. I know I was busy taking notes away feverishly, and I'm sure the folks were as well. And I'm sure on behalf of all the panelists that we thank you, everyone who's here with us today, for taking the time and being part of the conversation. And so with that, you will get a recording of today's conversation. So if there wasn't a piece you got to take notes back on, you can definitely rewind it. And we're looking forward to the next session, Unlocking the Potential of Sustainers, on Thursday, April 16th from 12:30 to 1:30. And there's a link in the chat for you to RSVP. But we heard be joyful, look internally, build pipelines, and ask questions. And so I think that's a good note to end on. And everyone have a good day and happy AI using.